DAO? Welcome to the Block List. I'm your host, Emily Klein, and today's featured interview is with Chris Kameir, who holds many titles. Before we get started, please subscribe to our content and find us on Patreon. Let's get to the interview. You juggle many jobs and projects. Can you tell me a little bit about everything that you are currently working on?
Honestly, I can't, but I tell you a few things.
Okay, that works.
So I'm in the business of structuring initial coin offerings, right? And so that's what the public refers to, and so I'll stick with that term, although, as you probably already found out by now, that's not really a useful term overall for many reasons. The two main reasons being, A, it's really a marketing event at the end of the day, and I mean, you can tokenize yourself in about 5 minutes, right? I can show you, no problem. And then that event has come and gone, right? As far as the actual technical aspect of that. And then also the obvious other reason is it has led to this unfortunate comparison to IPOs, which I've done in the past, and that is not helpful in the legal sense in the US environment. And anyway, so I'm at the center of it in the sense that I was a software developer before I became a lawyer. And so I can actually talk to all the parties that are involved. So I can basically read a smart contract. I can also read and write a real contract, or what we understood to be a contract, a written contract in the past. So I've been an interpreter between the worlds. And then thirdly, I've been a general counsel for an internet service provider back in the old world, hence the accent. In the late 90s, we were able to sell the company shortly before the market crashed at the height of the dot-com bubble. And so I have a lot of experience with internet and internet startups in particular. He also wrote some of the European deregulation papers for the telecommunication markets, incidentally. That was part of the doctor thesis I was working on at the time. And so have been very, very involved in the space for a very long time, sold dial-up services back in 94, 96, etc. So I've been around the block, and I'm very, very passionate about the internet at large. And my overall incentive is I want to fix the internet, because at the end of the day, what we created is really the commercial web, which is unfortunate. So it's controlled by very few companies in terms of its accessibility, and then it's controlled by even fewer companies that control visibility of content and distribution of content on the World Wide Web. So it was probably a little bit more than you needed to hear in this particular question, I understand, because you were asking me what I'm doing on a daily basis. So let's really focus on that for a second. So on a daily basis, I talk to a lot of lawyers worldwide. Typically what I tell people, there's really no incentive to do anything in the United States. The ICOs that I'm involved with now actually exclude everybody in the United States. Hence, it's always kind of a misnomer when people say, hey, there's any consumers that can be harmed here, because, well, they're actually being excluded by the ICOs itself. So there's really no point in even discussing this. It's like, okay, because what people forget is that the regulators don't regulate blockchain, right? So the blockchain doesn't exist in the context of governments or regulators. Governments and regulators exist in the context of blockchain. So what that means is, well, that actually what they are regulating is their population. So they're simply excluding, by extension and now factually, the population of being able to take part in this technology, and by extension, the ICOs that come out of that. So the structures that I do are usually internationally. So I get involved into the nitty gritty, but it always starts with, hey, what at the end of the day, what are you trying to build? And I'm only interested in projects that are actually trying to build something. So that are not in it just for the money, but they're trying to get the big picture, excited about the technology, and really want to do something to fix the current situation of centralized networks. Does it answer your question to some degree?
It does. Yes, thank you so much. That was a fantastic answer. So I find your website to be really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about your personal mission statement and how you carry that with you in the day-to-day of your business?
Yeah, so I've been blogging since '93, but we didn't call it
I saw
blogging
that.
then, right? So I think I had the first law blog in the world, I claim. I remember giving people my business card with www.kmeir.com on it back in the early days, and no one knew what that was. People would look at me, well, what's that? Well, that's on the internet. You go there. It's like, how do you go there? Well, you get a modem, and then you connect to it, and it makes a funny noise. Anyway, so, but initially, I really used that to structure my thoughts, which I do to this day. At one point in time, I wanted to become a writer, but 90% of what I write, I actually don't publish. It's just on my blog, but you wouldn't be able to find it. And so, the thing that I've been working on for 14 years on there is essentially an outline to what needs to be done to fix the World Wide Web. So, I think information is overall is a public resource. What I mean by that is like everything starts with information, right? The reason that we can talk today has so many underlying lags, right? So someone needed to invent electricity, right? Someone needed to invent telecommunications. Someone needed to invent whatever, right? So you got a whole lot of things that we are built on, and all of that is information in one way or the other. And so we have this supposedly the best information exchange tool in the history of the world, now the internet. And now what are we doing with that? We're pushing commercial interests. Makes no sense whatsoever. Aside from the overall paradigm, I think we go into later. But to me, that is a crime to humanity, because what we should be doing is disseminating information that actually makes the world a better place. And it sounds very altruistic. It's not altruistic. I think that if we actually do this, we can make progress in all areas of scientific research. We can get faster solutions to the problems that we face as humanity. May it be climate change, may it be cancer, may it be aging, because to me, aging is a disease. So, and that was, I believe, part of the initial intent of the guys that developed the overall system, the systematic. If you look at Tim Berners-Lee's early workings, so it was never meant to be what we have now. Initially, it was developed that it being the World Wide Web was thought of by Tim Berners-Lee at CERN, the European Nuclear Research Facility, and was meant to facilitate the exchange of information between researchers, right? And was never meant to be like this one-directional instrument. It was always meant to be peer-to-peer and bidirectional, but we totally got away from that. It's a minute point right now. And so that's what I want to fix. And what I realized really quick once I started to think about it and start writing about it, which was 14 years ago, there's all these different layers to that where the system can be used for something else, and that's not optimal. So it should always start free. There shouldn't be a commercial intent in distributing information, for that matter. And also that information can't be owned by anybody. But what I mean by that, if you go back and ask Einstein, right? So the theories that you came up with, can someone build something on top of that and then claim it's his? I would venture and imagine to say no. He'd say, no, if you used my theory, build something else on top of it, make it available to everybody, right? And I think that holds true for basically everything that you can read right now. Anyway, and so I started outlining these bullet points, have been shifting them back and forth. I think right now we are like 13, 14, and I imagine them to be chapters in a book at one point in time. But for now, it's just more practical for me to actually be involved with projects that start working on the actual implementation of some of those ideas, which goes back to decentralization. So as soon as I learned about Bitcoin, about decentralization efforts, I jumped on this and started learning everything about it just like everybody else. And soon enough, people started asking me about it. And soon enough, I found myself talking about it to larger and larger groups, to the extent where I now speak every week. And so I speak on just the introduction to the topic. I also speak on specifics, whatever exchanges, investing into it, etc. And yeah, so that's, again, a very long-winded answer to your question of what my blog is all about. So my blog is really about like structuring Chris. Structuring Chris includes my own mission statement that I published there, that I spend a lot of time on writing, just for me to understand myself, and then hopefully by putting it out there, being congruent with the message to other people.
I like it. I love it a lot. So you do a lot of work with blockchain and attorneys, as you were mentioning. Can you explain what all of that entails?
Yeah, so right now the unfortunate thing is that the US regulators just don't have a good understanding and again, obviously I don't have any insight in their motivation, but here's the political landscape, right? So this country is based on certain interest groups, like where people are being positioned in political offices is based on the way they're raising money, and it's not a secret that the banks are involved heavily in that activity. So there's no reason why you should be putting a stamp on an email, just the same way that there's no reason that you should be charged sending money to someone else, right? It's virtual in nature. It's binary, it's zeros and ones in a database someplace. There's no reason that it should take 2 or 3 days. There's no reason that you should be charged interest. It's your money that you're lending, right?
Yeah.
And what was your question?
No, it's okay. I just said
the day-to-day stuff that I do.
with blockchain and attorneys.
Yeah, so coming down to the nitty-gritty, it's really that typically we need to find a scenario that will exclude the United States, so that includes a little bit of legal setup at different jurisdictions, etc. And because there's just not clarity to be had. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there have been noises made by certain regulators, like FinCEN, for example, a couple of years ago. If you read this, it sounds like every time someone exchanging one currency for another, and they defined currency, which is really to say that they created law when they did that, that this is under their jurisdiction. And then when you peel down on that, well, every state in the United States also has money transmitter laws on top of that. So there's this whole uncertainty that people could get into, and by people I mean entities that create tokens that could conflict whatever FinCEN and or the state regulators think may or may not be in their jurisdiction. And some states have issued some guidances and or made some laws, like Washington has put out some Delaware has put out some useful guidance. Nevada has put out some regulation. New York made some very unfortunate decisions. But the bottom line is, as an operator, you're better off right now just avoiding the United States and look at jurisdictions that have actually clarity on that topic and support it. Because at the end of the day, to me, it's really a new version of the internet. And anything on top of that is just an application. So the token part, the currency part, is not as important as the actual true utility in the sense of what it actually does. And if you think about it this way, money and currency, and fiat currencies in particular, they're really the language of trade. Well, to me, if you tell me, well, you can only use this one language, right? This fiat, which means let it be done by decree, this is your language. That's a free speech violation. I should be able to use whatever language I want. Right? I should not be limited to one or the other. Anyway, again, that goes more into my philosophy. So coming back to it on a day-to-day basis, I work with lawyers around the world, different jurisdictions. I write a lot of the white paper details. I instruct a lot of teams. I review their work, make sure that they don't get in trouble, give guidances on that, do classes, give speeches. So that's how my day looks like. 14 hours a day in the space, 7 days a week.
In your new space.
In my new office.
In your new office with all the boxes.
Exactly. Well, the boxes are all in the foyer, but the reason why we picked this office is this is the ocean down there.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
So we're in Newport Beach.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, congratulations. It's a beautiful office with a beautiful view. You're very lucky.
Yes, I feel very fortunate after 30 years in the middle of Europe.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So can you give us an overview of DAO?
Distributed Autonomous Organizations. Yeah, so most people who listen to this, and you probably know that this term was kind of taken over by this quote-unquote field approach, which to me wasn't really a field approach. So when we look back at that situation, the company that claimed that acronym, in a way, it was a good test to see what the network would do. And okay, it did what it did. We have now some certain experience we can look back on. That's very helpful in the long run to have had. But overall, the paradigm is one of the most interesting aspects of blockchain overall. And what I mean by that is I think and hope that it's going to do away with what we have now, which is for-profit organizations, right? So this is going to allow what I call for-purpose organizations, right? And whenever I speak, I use as an example the Coronado Bridge. The Coronado Bridge connects downtown San Diego with this little half island called Coronado. And initially, when it was built, there was a toll booth at the end and cost you $1.50 to pass. Eventually, this toll booth was removed and the bridge was turned over to the community at large. The reason was the bridge was financed with private money. They were allowed to make a certain amount of profit, and then it was given to the community for use. So you can accomplish this, as you can tell, very easily with a DAO, where you assign property and property rights to whoever wants to take part in it and allow them to make profit. It doesn't mean that they cannot make any profit, but you assign first and foremost a purpose to it. If you think about it this way, the most prominent example would be a search engine, right? So the most prominent search engine right now, what do they really do? They sell advertising, right? So 90% of their revenue is coming from advertising. All of their profits are coming from advertising. So they might say that their mission is to structure the world's information and make it more accessible and useful, but that's always going to be subsequent, obviously, to the main purpose of what a for-profit corporation, specifically a public traded corporation, has to do, which is increase shareholder value. How do you increase shareholder value for an advertising company? You make people click and buy more advertising. So then how do you make a better search engine at the same time? Well, the best search engine, at least in my mind, would be a search engine that gives me the perfect result. I click on it, I read everything objectively about the topic that there is to know. Might it be my cell phone provider plan or the next car I want to buy? And then I go to the next. Well, how many ads do you think I'd be clicking on? 0. So what that means is if I make a 50% better search engine, in a case where I have an advertising-based business model, I make 50% less revenue. So it's impossible for them to do that. So if I had a for-purpose organization, a DAO, where I assign the main purpose being make a better search engine rather than make the most profit for the shareholders, I could actually achieve that goal, whereas in a for-profit situation, I will never be able to. And you can build a million examples. And what I can see moving forward is wherever there's a DAO for purpose, whoever is making money from a derivative, from something that's not actually dedicated towards that particular purpose, the DAO will eradicate everybody else competing with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that response. Could you explain what blockchain is in your own words and what your views are on it?
Sure. Yeah, obviously do that every day. So to me, again, that's just me. Blockchain, it's first and foremost a paradigm of something that's decentralized, distributed, and open source. And so that's immutable, ledger, etc. Every buzzword that everybody else is using as well. But to me, what's very important is that they all have to be there, because some of the things that people call blockchain don't have one or more of these criteria, which to me, again, just to me, excludes them from being able to overall use the term. I.e., if I am a big corporation with a 3-letter word with white letters on blue background, and I build a blockchain, I'm the one running the blockchain, I'm the corporation. I'm just calling that a blockchain, but it might as well be a database, and because it's set, as soon as this corporation no longer exists, this blockchain won't exist. And in a blockchain scenario, to me, it has to be independent, right? It has to be distributed, decentralized, and that's what's at the core of it. So that's what's very important to me. Again, personal opinion.
Perfect. Where do you think the future of cryptocurrency is headed?
So that also comes back to what we call cryptocurrencies again. Right now, this term specifically in the popular media, quote unquote, is assigned to a lot of things that are not currencies whatsoever. So if you look at tokens, right? So let's take it one level up and then two levels up. If you look at tokens, they might have a currency aspect to that, but ideally, in most cases, that shouldn't be the overriding aspect. The overriding aspect or utility that these things have should be something else, i.e., provide access to a certain network or have another function on a platform, etc. And there's very little of this at the moment. A lot of this is still being built. But the point here being is that a lot of users of the word cryptocurrencies don't take this into account. They just blanket the market with this calling everything cryptocurrency when it probably would be more accurate to call something a virtual asset, right? So the most prominent example would be Bitcoins. Like, it doesn't make really for a good currency, as everybody will readily admit at the moment, right? So it has all the three elements in one way or another that we assign to money, but it's really, as most people will tell you, closer to being a store of value. So being closer to what we used to have and still do use gold for, because that's the other thing that people forget is like gold is still being moved around to this day, right? So there's still gold walls and countries are hoarding gold, mining gold, and keeping this as the backup. It's held on the balance sheets of the Federal Reserves. So, but back to your question, cryptocurrencies, I think it's very important to distinguish what is a cryptocurrency in a narrow sense, meaning it actually is being created for the particular functions of a currency. Or those three functions, and doesn't have an overriding other aspect to it, because then you actually need to look at this in a different way. Like you look at CryptoKitties, right? You could treat it like that, but it's not a currency, right? So it's a virtual asset of sorts, and we will have to invent a few more terms. That's the other thing. People are reluctant to look at this and say, hey, this is something entirely new, which is something that the regulators struggle with specifically. This is something entirely new. We can't use our own paradigms on this because, hey, this never existed before, right? That's the unfortunate thing about law, right? A lot of the laws in this country and others have been written before certain technologies were brought to life. So now we're trying to apply those when they were created, when we were riding around in buggies that were pulled by horses, right? So those people had no idea that there would be an internet and virtual currencies and databases, etc. So in my opinion, as an ex-lawyer, recovering lawyer, every law should have an expiration date on it, right? So it's like, okay, we revisit this in whatever, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, and if it's still good, let's keep it, but we have to reenact it. Otherwise, let's do away with it.
That's a really good idea. I've never thought of it that way, but you're completely right. Oh my gosh. So on your LinkedIn, it does say that you are a cryptocurrency investor. I just want to know, what are your tips and tricks and what should we be looking out for right now?
True utility and infrastructure. So if you're looking at the overall market and dissect that, just focus on the top things that are out there, so to speak, and see the allocation and the overall direction of the market right now. I mean, we are very, very, very early. So I think the last statistic that I saw was that we have right around 20 million wallets. What that really means, there's really only 5 million people that hold any form of virtual currencies, if we want to use that term. So what that means true is that you have a very specific profile that's allocating those funds. So you got a lot of early geeks, right? Miners. You got people that work off found money that they're redistributing, etc. So that is swinging the market. But then also, if you're just focusing on the actual money being deployed, if you're looking at the top 10, 15 projects, you're going to realize, oh, those guys raised real money in terms of what we used to think of as real money. They have venture capital. They actually raised some money before that. They actually built something. What did they build? So they built infrastructure things. They built protocols. They built things that could replace all banking overall, right? And so what I'm looking for is those type of network effects, something that's sustainable in the long run, that has a community behind it that supports it, right? Because you and I, we can tokenize ourselves right now, and no one would be interested in that, and no one would be built anything on top of that, and it would be a very lonely, untraded coin. So you need to be looking at the team of its long-term viability and be actually interested and excited about this, because the other aspect to this is the early quote-unquote investors, they were no investors. What they were voters. So they voted with their money. So they gave something to a project, and oftentimes those things were structured as foundations, and they were assigning this not with the expectation of making huge amounts of profits. They never thought they would see any of them. Most of those guys never expected to see any money back. Now they're getting it in spades, but they're a community of people that believed in this. And this is how the internet overall works. Like, the internet runs on open source, runs on people donating their time. So if I don't have the time, right, or the skills to contribute to a project, but I really love what those guys are doing, so why not assign some currency to that, whatever currency that is, and see this project come to life? That makes way more sense. And so from that perspective, is like, if I throw money at something, if I just like what those guys are doing, if they want to provide whatever, free water to a village or clean air to a community, or what, save all the whales, and if I like that and donate this and something comes out of it, and that has an actual monetary result, that's just an added bonus, right? So that goes back to, there should be for purpose rather than for profit corporations. And if you that if you do what you like, you never work a day in your life. That's what I do. I never work. I'm up 14 hours doing something. I never work.
That's a good way to look at things, let me tell you. Well, Chris, we just want to thank you so much for your time today and for being a guest here on the Block List.